Hi. So we are here, this is the Zoning Board of Adjustment on September 24th, 2024, and we're here to have a work session reviewing our rules and regulations and other concerns, questions that have come up over the time. It is not a public hearing, but we will have an audience perhaps at some point. And so I'm now going to give it to Trevor, who's going to lead us through this discussion and kind of tell us what his guidelines are for interference questions, whatever.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair Eldridge. So my plan for tonight is quite simply just to help walk the board in a methodical way through the rules. We can spend as much or as little time on any rule that any board member or a combination of board members wants to talk about. Steph and I will take notes based on the board's conversation, and at some future date come back to the board with some suggestions based on the board's conversation here tonight. If we can come up with some kind of consensus, which then the board could react to and reject or accept or modify or whatever the board's pleasure is. But that was how we kind of thought would be the most helpful way to approach this. Okay. So the first section here is really just about when the meetings are, when they're going to be held, how they are scheduled, and what the board does in the case of a lengthy agenda. I think based on a couple of the suggestions that I saw or questions that I saw circulated by the board in advance, there were questions about other kinds of meetings that the board might want to hold, whether those be in regards to recommendations regarding zoning ordinance amendments, or whether those be reviews on the progress of the board. This might be an appropriate place to put those rules because as the meetings are scheduled, this would give staff an idea of how to schedule them, when to schedule them, what time of year, etc. So I don't know if that's something anyone wants to talk about or has any thoughts on, or if this section seems fine the way it is.
Does anybody have anything in this first section about times and meetings, or shall we?
Just have a question. So Trevor, are you saying that based on what's here, we couldn't schedule these other sorts of meetings, like we would need to have?
No, of course not. More what I was saying is, if it's, I'm just thinking in practicality, right? If there's a desire on the board to have an annual meeting where you talk about how the board is doing on its decisions, so again, that was one of the things that was suggested. That could be something that's put in the rules, which would then instruct staff to kind of annually schedule that in some given month of the year, right? In November or December or something like that, depending on what the board wants. Of course, if you just want to do that on your own, you're certainly welcome to do that. It was just more to keep the board honest, I guess, and have it be more of a regular thing moving forward. But if that's not what you want, then that's totally fine too. You could just schedule them as the board feels they would be helpful and appropriate.
Okay. Jeff has a question.
Yeah, that just reminded me of a thought is for this document is if something isn't listed, it's not necessarily not allowed, right? Because it's not like something has to be included in here to be done. Like for example, the meeting that's not just a regular meeting time. Like you just said, we could still do that. So that's the general. I know there's like a legal term for like whether you if it's opted in or out, and you can.
Yeah. I mean, the point of this the point of this document is to give members of the public an idea of, what the board expects out of applicants, out of staff, and basically out of themselves, and how a meeting is going to be conducted, and when they can expect those meetings to occur on a regular basis, so that they can kind of plan for it, right?
Right.
They can plan for when to be there and what to do when they show up and what to do in advance. I mean, that's really the point of this document. So the more information you can provide to people, the better. But you're right, of course, the board is welcome to and frequently does deviate from the rules, right?
Okay, yep.
Yes, go ahead. We're going to be first names tonight. Go ahead, David.
So in my experience, I don't see a need to put something in the rules and regulations. Typically, I think the board chair and the board as a whole tends to have a sense of when they're not being fully effective and can call for an additional meeting to be held to try and bring the board back into some kind of a better understanding of the needs, especially if you have a bunch of new members. Oftentimes, it can be beneficial to hold a special meeting where you discuss, board procedure and whatnot. But in my experience, I don't think I wouldn't make it a regular meeting. And more importantly, you just never know when during the calendar year you're going to actually have an opportunity to have a second meeting that wouldn't require then a third meeting because you have so many meetings in a particular month.
I agree with David. Yeah, I think that's a good idea, that we trust ourselves. And the planning department, if you see that we need something, if you want to discuss, then we just make it happen.
Great. Okay. Well, moving right along then, the next section is the responsibilities of the code official. Oftentimes that's going to be Steph, helping to prepare the applicants and the board for working through any application. This is, these requirements are pretty basic and straightforward. I don't know if there's anything additional that the board would find useful or helpful here. Thoughts anyone might have?
I have nothing highlighted. Oh, yes, go ahead, I guess.
So it's up to the code official to decide whether or not something comes forward to us. We get a couple of applications, I'm not going to name them, specifically where the plans didn't seem quite as final. And, I don't want to be put in the position of trying to figure out if plans are final and whatnot. So but that's only been 2, I think, applications in the entire time I've been here, basically. So
It's been an ongoing discussion to some degree or another. So, yeah, I think that is something we want to make sure that just doesn't come here if it's not.
Sure. You could certainly put in another, a third responsibility, which could be to make a threshold determination as to an application's completeness.
I feel like that's in here.
yeah, it's number 7.
Yeah, it's
So
definitely in
we've
here
authorized Steph
to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that
Okay.
what we're saying is sometimes,
Yeah.
for
Oh, I see
whatever
what you're saying.
reason,
Yeah.
it gets through. So I guess we would hope to prevent that a little more in the future, because it puts something on us that we're not supposed to decide.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Yep. So this next section talks about what the applicant is supposed to provide, what they're responsible for. Of course, it is the applicant's burden of proof to prove that they have met the elements in any given application, whether that's a variance application or special exception. And this really lays out how the board expects an applicant to lay out its argument and what those requirements are. Sure.
No, go
Any
ahead, Doug.
comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had I have 2 items, one which I previously mentioned in my email to Stephanie earlier. 4-14 requires the applicants to provide 11 copies.
Just gonna say.
It seems incredibly archaic at this point since we're all digitized. To me, that's something that needs to be updated. And then the other one that I did not mention, but in 4-6, in the sort of the table with a series of bullets, one of the bullets is scale of all drawings and plans. And I've actually had a couple of instances where people have kind of asked about, I really don't have a scale drawing per se. What do I do to meet the scale of all drawings and plans? We may just want to add if applicable there. I mean, in some cases, it's really just an illustrative document and not necessarily to scale. And in particular, that can come up because if somebody feels like they have to use something that's like a plan that was prepared for their property, and it really belongs, it was created by usually a surveyor and is stamped and everything, and people will go and then make drawings on it that aren't necessarily something that the surveyor prepared. I know that bothers some of the surveyors if that ends up in a public document where it could be implied that it's something that they created, right? So my caution to those that would be that, hey, just don't include any of the surveyor's information and just say this is just illustrative, something along those lines. That's all.
So we're saying that we're not demanding it be to scale then, right? Or
If-
only in certain,
If it has a scale, indicate what it is. If it's just illustrative, then
let us know.
just let us know.
Okay. Does that work for staff? Yeah.
And I think that'll work well for applicants too, because a lot of the smaller projects are hesitant to hire engineers and architects for things that the fee of hiring those professionals is going to outweigh the cost of the project.
You might consider putting in a provision, though, that either the code official or the board itself could, upon request, have the applicant prepare and provide scaled drawings, in appropriate circumstances.
Right.
So are we just gonna, so Steph, are you taking down these notes and you'll prepare drafts that we will then look at and then, I assume, adopt new drafts at a certain point?
If that's what you guys would like to see, I'm happy to do that.
I think that we would like to see that. I mean, it doesn't have to be in motion form that we want this, but ways that we can mull it over and then get together at another time and decide if we want to formalize it.
So just like underline the new changes.
Jeff has a question.
Yeah.
Jeffrey has a question.
I would just add, kind of to what we were talking about before with the completeness of applications. For number 6 here, I think these are all great things that need to be included, and sometimes it's more important than others. So I guess I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but just that if all these things are met, that's great. But so for example, like a really small project, some of these are overkill. But on the bigger projects, if these, I've actually noticed sometimes these are lacking, like an elevation with.
Well, it does have. I mean, the first line of 6 says unless waived by the code official. So
Right, okay,
it kind of
okay.
provides that.
Yes, okay.
That to Steph, but I think the edit regarding the scale just speaks to the fact that that's not always provided, and
Yeah.
maybe you're flipping the requirement a little bit.
Okay.
Maybe you don't have to provide it, making it clear that there are often circumstances where you don't have to provide a scale drawing.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm sorry, yes, go ahead.
While we're on this one, what about some of the larger projects we've had that have not brought in a traffic study and we've asked to see it or voted against it because they didn't have it? Should that be added to the list? Since it could be waived by the code official when it's not necessary. We obviously don't need one if someone's putting up a garage, but if someone's putting up a hotel on
So
Route 1.
traffic study here, you would like to put in under the list by number 6, and then it would be if applicable by the
Right.
staff. But I wonder what that's opening us to. I mean, if we don't specifically say it, does that mean they don't need it, rather than leaving it open-ended more and having the staff require it? I'm always afraid of too many details. I don't know if that's a real thing. I
Because
think it is.
Yeah, I was just going to add maybe something like for single-family homes or duplexes, it's automatically never, there's never a situation where that would be needed. But I wouldn't say all residential, because sometimes like a huge apartment.
We were going to say.
Yeah.
What if we know something has to go to traffic and safety, should that automatically?
Yeah.
Paul's been waiting for a while. I'm just going to
okay.
let him go.
That's okay.
No, go ahead. It might be germane.
I don't think anything's necessary. And here's the logic to that. The applicant has to meet 5 criteria. Anything that the applicant needs to bring in to meet that 5 criteria, he should know to do that. If he does not, and somebody brings up an objection about those 5 criteria, that's on the applicant. I don't think it's the job of this board to like bend over backwards where the applicant has a job, he knows the criteria, he knows what he wants, he has the 5 yeses he needs to get. He also should know if there's going to be any objection. That being said, okay, for something like the traffic study, I mean, that applicant should have come in with a traffic study. He knew that there was going to be objection there.
I think
What
we
we're
should not talk about
suggesting-
specific applications.
Yeah, but what we're suggesting is not that we say, hey, you have to do a traffic study, but that it's automatically part, that the planning department gets it prepared for us. And
Yeah.
the question is, do we add it to a list, or do we just kind of do it as is? I think that's the question.
Any material that meets the 5 criteria that's necessary for the applicant.
I don't think, I wouldn't rely on that. I think that you're being overly optimistic about what people understand about the project. Clearly, we have some big developers who have done this many times, but that isn't always the case. David?
Yeah, so based off of my experience, I wouldn't want to make this too complicated. There's dozens of things that we can put
Right.
into this little table that we have here. I think the intent of this, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, is to really give a handout to the homeowner applicant who's coming in, who doesn't necessarily have any idea about what it is that the board is expecting. With these larger projects that have, major staffs and attorneys and everything, those are about the only ones that you're going to expect to require a traffic study. For my, setback on my little, side porch addition, I don't need a traffic study. In general, my experience is we're almost always flooded with lots of extra information that probably isn't terribly useful to us, including traffic studies and other things. My experience in those types of applications, we're getting way more info than we probably need, not way too little. It's a rare exception when you're getting way too little. I would leave it out of our rules and
I just want to,
regulations.
if you don't mind, go back to Tom. What did you have in mind when you asked the question?
Well,
If I
some of
may
the
ask.
conversation may have changed my mind. What I had in mind when I asked the question was, I guess when someone goes through all the effort to present a proposal on a major project like one we had recently, and is missing a key part that the board expects to see, should we spell out that we expect to see that?
Well, we have the option to ask them to postpone before hearing it.
Yes, we do.
And so we do have that if that night we realize that this is the situation, or if we realize it in the few days before the meeting, I suppose we could ask the planning board to do it for us, but there's no need for us to hear what we would consider an incomplete application. Oh, yes.
Can I just add one thing? I think what we're trying to do here is outline the minimum requirements, so what we would expect of every applicant to provide in their application. So I think that, to Dave's point, the less that's in here, the better.
I agree.
But it's just my opinion.
Ready to move? No. Yes.
I don't know if we've reached consensus on that, but I agree with that. I think we run the risk of, if we put too many things in here, and if they don't have it, they'll say, but it wasn't in the list.
I agree.
And I think for the smaller projects, like the house on the vacant lot, I don't know, where, something is a special exception, which is really a minor special exception, to ask for a traffic study would probably be too much. So,
Completely
yeah,
too much.
so.
Will you be buying a new car in the future?
I would just fear that the homeowner applicant would look and be, traffic study? Oh my goodness, what am I going to do to get a traffic study?
It would lower our workload.
Well, right, but at that point, we allow the code official to say, no, you don't need to bring one.
Right.
Yeah, I
right.
know, but.
Or we could do it the other way. We could tell someone, yes, you do need one now. And okay,
Again, in my many years in the board, it's very rare that you get not enough information. Almost always you're getting like way more information. You may not believe all the
Family history. Good. Okay,
Okay, thanks. So if no one else has any other comments on what the applicant should be providing here and what the board expects from the applicant, the next section is on fees. I mean, this really just refers out to the fee committee. We don't have any ability to modify that particularly. The board, the composition and powers of the board, those are set by statute. Not a lot of ability to change that. I think voting is worth certainly spending some time on here. I did see comments in the, in what was submitted in advance about voting. And, the board could certainly consider if it wants to change how it votes and how it gets things, particularly to a rehearing or not.
may I ask a question?
Yes.
So this, a tie is a denial and 4 affirmatives are necessary, is not state law? It's town by town?
So what I would, yes, what I would
I thought
recommend.
it was an easy question.
Yeah, I mean, what I would recommend, just given some evolution in state law since these were written, is that there always be an affirmative vote to do something, because you have the requirement of findings of fact. So if you're going to deny something, my recommendation would be you vote to deny, and that vote carries the day, carries a majority. Or if you're going to approve something, likewise. And then you have appropriate findings of fact supporting said vote. That would be my recommendation. Now, ties are a different issue, but when you're talking about, are you voting to approve something, are you voting to deny something, my recommendation certainly would be you vote to do that.
Yeah, so pass a motion rather than fail to.
Pass the motion,
Yeah.
yes, instead of the fail to pass a motion.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you say
That
that
makes
again? Because I just want to make sure that I'm on the same page. So if we vote to deny
And it passes.
and it passes, it is
Great.
denied. But if we
Great.
vote to approve and it doesn't pass,
Then someone should make
to
a
vote to
motion to
deny.
deny.
Okay, and that has been my understanding.
And
I just wanted,
And then have supporting findings of fact to build the record for the board.
about why it was.
About why,
Right.
what criteria, what did
Which
you.
is a given with us.
Which is a given, exactly. So that's kind of the guiding light on that. I
Okay.
mean, when you're talking about ties, that's different, but.
So,
So if we're hopelessly deadlocked, we've done the motion to approve, like deny or approve, and we're still at a tie,
That's a denial.
that's a denial.
Yep.
so we've had that situation where
Yeah.
we had a motion to approve that failed on a tie vote.
Mm-hmm.
We asked for another motion to deny, failed on a tie vote.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my opinion, if there's a motion to approve and it fails on a tie vote, you should stop, because it's clear that it's been denied in our rules. It says with a motion, if the motion fails on a tie vote, the variance is not approved. That's standard Roberts rule in every deliberative assembly, and I don't think we should deviate from that on a tie vote.
Right. So I agree with you that, certainly it's clear that that's standard Roberts rules. I totally agree. But what you're doing here is different. And the state law requiring findings of fact in support of one way or another, it puts if that
So that-
decision gets appealed, where do you
So the
point
findings
to?
of fact come out, which is in our rules, and
Yep.
says if the motion fails on a tie vote,
Yep.
or if the motion is denied, the people who voted against it have to provide finding of facts
Sure.
and lay those out. So we've got that covered in our
Yep.
rules. So I don't,
And I think that's defensible. I certainly think it's defensible, and I would certainly defend that absolutely. But
see, in my opinion, if you go the other way,
Yep.
if you, like we had, if you have a motion to approve and it fails on a tie vote, and a motion to deny and it fails on a tie vote, you don't have a decision.
Sure.
You don't have a decision, and the applicant is left hanging, in my opinion.
Right.
You're better off, I think we're better off if the motion to approve fails on a tie vote, which, it's going to be 6 attendees, right? That's when that's going to happen in all probability. Then you should just stop, because it's been denied, as stated in our rules, and is normal.
because you tell the applicant they need 4 affirmative votes to pass. That
So
is our,
that confuses me a little. Why would we do that?
because we're a board of 7, I guess.
Okay, if we have 7 people, you can have 4. We can have a quorum at 6. Why do you need a 4-2 vote to pass?
Well, that's why we tell the applicants that they can postpone, because it's harder for them to get it. But 4 is the magic number, not majority.
I believe it's from statute.
Yeah, that's from.
Yeah.
The statute says,
Statute says.
It always
We
has
have to
to
have
be a
4.
majority of the board members, not the board
Whether-
members
right.
present.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And it goes by town or city,
Right.
because some can have 7, some can have 5, some can have 3.
I don't know about 3. I know the standard is 5. Somehow we have a statute exemption that gives us 7,
Well,
Because we're a
Yeah.
city.
1952,
because we're reports.
special legislation, 1952.
So which
Dairies,
is why
and
we're
London
so
Dairies
careful about
not.
telling people, petitioners, about anybody who is not, who has recused themselves, so they'll be sure to know who the number of voting people. David?
Thank you. Just going to your comments on 6-6, that paragraph, but that was written in my time as chair. I think it was actually added in the 2019 update to the rules. And it was really something that we worked with staff, I worked with staff, the board did, trying to come up with some way out of it, because we were running to these cases where we would have these 3-3 tie votes. And in particular, we had one where we just simply denied, we said it's denied because it ended up in a tie. And no one from the opposition side had ever said much of anything substantive about why they felt that they were voting against it. And so it was really just an attempt to go and make sure that there's information given back to the applicant if they're ultimately denied, that they're getting the information they need to be able to say, this is what the board was thinking when they denied me, this is my basis for going through for an appeal. Now, we did put the stuff in there about the subsequent motion. The idea is it could be a denial, or it could possibly be somebody reworking the motion to maybe get an approval or break the deadlock in some way, like there's something that's sticking with one particular member. Just gives an opportunity to maybe get a majority. But, and we kind of got hung up on it on one case too, where how many times do I have to go? Do I have to keep getting new motions until we break the deadlock? That wasn't the intent. It was simply to give an opportunity there for a way to find a 4-2 vote of some sort. But if in the chair's mind, the board is hopelessly deadlocked and then it is denied, and then solicit information from the board members to make sure that we have something for the record that says, this is why you're being denied. That was the intent of it. Is it crystal clear on that point? Probably not. I mean, we reworded it a bunch of times to try and make it as clear as we could, but that was what we were thinking back at that time.
Compared to some of the other paragraphs here, it's golden. Go ahead, Beth.
So my confusion always with this is if the motion to grant it results in a tie vote, we don't ever start with if the motion to denial results in a tie vote.
Right.
So if that, or do we then go on to a subsequent motion?
So I think the concept there is if you have a motion to deny, you've sort of laid out all the arguments, but you're right, and that it's not a winning motion. Yeah. So presumably you would then solicit a motion to approve that would fail. I don't know. Yeah. It's always a messy situation, no matter how you look at it.
Okay, so Trevor, how can we clean it up?
I mean, I can see the point of it because you're trying to comply with the state regulations about finding of fact.
Right.
And with a tie vote, you don't have to say anything. There is no finding of fact other than we like it, we don't. And you can go through that iteration. So, I mean, you could do the exact same thing with one vote, a motion to grant the variance that ends up in a tie, and then solicit finding of facts from, the people who voted either way. And that way you're covered.
Yeah, you would need to, well, right. I would think you would need to do that because the effect would be a denial.
Yeah.
And
Because the
therefore
only
you
reason
need
you're
to-
doing the
right.
multiple votes
Right.
is to satisfy a state requirement
Right.
for finding a fact, period.
And to make sure we have
Right.
all the details in
Yeah.
there should the,
And you don't want to leave Trevor hanging.
no.
Yeah, I'll just add that I am a big fan of having the chair soliciting comments from the members who voted against. Both for the board members for being comfortable with how the vote happened, as well as for the applicant. It just seems more fair and complete. And also, if they, in addition to an appeal, if they ever wanted to come back with a different application, they would. That's helpful information.
Yeah, I mean, as long as the board is building its record and building those findings of fact, that's the most important piece to me. You know, that's you're satisfying state law, and you keep in mind the 4-vote hurdle to approve.
Right.
I mean, I think those are kind of your guiding lights. I mean, how the board wants to navigate that. I mean, this is you know, a decent. This is a fine path.
But
Well, I just
Steph,
want
I'm
to,
gonna say something.
sorry. Go ahead, Steph.
I was just going to clarify. So when Trevor talks about finding of fact, and this might be obvious to everybody, he's not just talking about the 5 criteria that's described on the small piece of paper that I gave you. He's talking about, discussion around those pieces and how explaining, even if it's just in the discussion of the board, how you got to your decision to support whatever is written in those findings of fact sheets. So I just want to clarify, it doesn't have to be just, what goes in the little box for the findings of fact. It's the whole process of how to get there.
Thanks.
Have we done that? David, have you done that? When you've been in this situation, have you asked for finding of fact in the way you'd ask people, why did you not support this? Why did you find it lacked?
Yeah, so again,
Okay.
back to Trevor's point, ideally, we're going to get a motion that is a winning motion, i.e. that we have 4 members or a majority of the members who are voting for that particular motion, right? As long as you have that, you should cover yourself one way or the other, because you have a succeeding
Right,
motion,
right.
and those facts were laid out in the motion. You're required to say why you're denying or why you're approving. It's when you get into this tie that you kind of get into that sort of gray area now of you can get a non-winning motion that talks to one thing. You want to go back, and then you're inevitably probably going to get another non-winning motion
That talks to the opposite.
that talks to the opposite. You never know. Somebody might change their vote just to move things along. There's possibilities. That's why we kind of left open the possibility.
I guess I was.
But then, yes, I would solicit and say, okay, this was going to be denied. For the record, I need some of the, words from those who are voting to deny the application. What are your reasons related to the criteria for why you are denying
Okay.
this?
Okay.
So those are now in the record.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Beth.
So I think my problem with this paragraph is that it doesn't cover the denial, if the motion to deny. So I think that that's something we have to
That's right,
discuss.
and
And
I
I
have-
think the other thing is that in practice, we have treated the subsequent motion as the opposite motion, like the motion to approve. Say we've done a motion to approve, and it's been a tie vote, then we do the motion to deny, and it's a tie vote. But as I read this, we're supposed to be doing another motion to approve.
You just said we're doing a motion.
No, I mean, so I think in practice, what we have been doing is, say somebody's moved to grant the variance and it ends in a tie vote. Then what we have done is said, all right, can I get a motion to deny? And then we get another tie vote. The way I read this, I think that subsequent motion is supposed to be another motion to approve, not necessarily a motion to deny.
But then you'd be how would that advance you?
It says, unless a subsequent motion is made that receives at least 4 affirmative votes. So you could read subsequent motion broadly, meaning that it's the opposite
I
motion,
just
or
thought
it's
it
the
meant
same.
the next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it's the same motion.
I'm just going to go to Tom because his hand was up. Sure. Okay.
I agree with you, Beth. I think the way that's worded, it says the motion fails unless somebody brings forward a motion that everybody agrees to approve it. And so that we may not get a second motion that gets approved, but it provides an opportunity if someone alters the motion or modifies the motion somehow, modifies the approval with a stipulation or whatever, and it gets approved, then the variance could be approved. If you don't get that second motion, it's failed.
Can I just ask a question? I just want to understand where we're going here. I mean, because I think what you're talking about, Beth, and what the board's practice is maybe one motion is made, whether it's a motion to grant or a motion to deny, and then there's a tie. And then a second motion is made, one way or another. It may be the opposite, it may not be the opposite, but it's a second motion, and it's also a tie. At that point, it's a denial? Is that where the board
No,
wants
what
to
I'm
be?
saying is that our subsequent motion has always been the opposite motion.
Okay, well, I'm trying to say, where does the board want to be? I guess that's
If-
what I want to know.
Okay, in my, if
Yeah,
the
yeah.
first motion, oh man, I thought I
It doesn't
had
matter.
this.
Doesn't matter which way the motions go. I mean, say there's a motion to grant, that fails, there's a second motion to grant, that also fails. Where does the board want to be at that point?
Well, okay, so what I'm saying is our practice has been, like, say we move to approve or deny,
Yeah.
and it fails, we go the opposite way on the next motion. We don't do another repeat motion.
Doesn't that make sense?
Why
though?
would you?
Right, why would you?
I'm confused about what you're saying.
Unless a subsequent motion, I mean, because we're talking about motion to grant,
Why would you make the same motion again? if it
so,
was
but
just
maybe
denied?
David can clear it up.
David, go ahead.
So and we can reword those first few words there, if a motion to grant. I think the intent of that was if a motion related to granting a variance or special exception wasn't necessarily to say it had to be a motion in the affirmative to grant it, being the first motion that fails. It could be any motion related to something that's come before us to grant a variance or grant a special exception. I think that was the intent of it. That's probably not how it reads. And then the subsequent motion could be another affirmative motion, but with stipulations that would make it more palatable to another board member that could
Different
get you
motion,
to yes, right? So there is some opportunity there for a subsequent motion to perhaps get break the deadlock in some way or another, perhaps.
So could you fix it as easily as just saying, if a motion to grant or deny a variance,
Sure.
put that in there, and then below, say, if a
Yeah.
subsequent different motion?
The
A
next
subsequent
motion.
alternate motion, right?
Yeah,
Subsequent motion.
just any if any
Yes,
subsequent.
if you
Any
put,
subsequent.
Any
yes, because if
subsequent,
you
yeah.
put the choice in the first sentence, then,
So
yes, don't say that, yes.
I'm not sure that really works. If someone comes forward with a motion to deny
Okay,
and it fails on a tie vote,
right. It's failed.
the motion failed. Is that the same as?
Denial failed.
The denial failed. Is that
So
the
the
same as?
application-
Right,
is
which
not
is
denied.
why we bring it back again to try to
A
get it.
subsequent motion.
So
Man,
the
oh,
way
man,
that
go
I'm
ahead.
reading this is, if the first vote is a
It's a
tie
negative.
vote,
Okay.
you should always have a second vote. You should always have is that the way I'm reading this? Is that where we want to go? And then it's only if the second one also ties, then you're deadlocked, you're done.
Yes.
You can move on.
That has been our practice, yes.
And that was the intent when it was written back, I believe, for the 2019.
Right, that's how I read this. It requires basically two votes that are both tied in order to result in the denial, whichever way the two motions
So you've
went.
just made it easier to deny. Because you don't need an affirmative vote to deny, you just need two tie votes to deny.
But it's
This
not
is why,
You can't
this is
pass
why
it.
you
No,
stop.
I see what you're saying.
You
It's
know,
not
this-
so much that it's easier or not, it is the way the board feels about it. So-
I got to tell you, if you have a motion to deny, well, if you have a motion to grant.
Okay.
Maybe we should always
Let's
start with a motion to
good,
grant.
okay.
And it fails on a tie vote, you should stop. It's denied. That's what our rules say. The result is a denial. Unless somebody comes in with a different version of a motion, not a motion to deny, comes in with a different version of a motion that people are
Let me
willing
try
to grant.
this, they'll say.
Whatever, we grant the variance with these stipulations, and somebody says, oh, okay, I can live with that, and now it passes.
Or doesn't pass,
Or
in which
doesn't
case then
pass.
it truly is denied, but the person's
truly
had
is
another chance which is what you would like to see.
I've got two comments. One is for the actual wording. Instead of saying if a motion to grant or deny a variance, you could just say if a motion results in a tie vote, just so it's a little bit more concise. And then related to the comment about if two motions tie, if the pass it and deny both tie, and your concern is that it's easier to deny, I think it still makes sense, even though I don't like the idea of making it easier to deny. It's better than the alternatives, which would be to pass it if both tied, or to continue it indefinitely, which is also not ideal. So I think a denial is,
Okay, so
yeah.
if I can just, and I think so the process could be, if the first motion is a motion to deny, and there's a tie vote, then there should be a subsequent motion to grant, which could then tie. But after the motion to grant ties, whether there was a motion to deny or not before, at that stage, the chair would then solicit some alternate motion, and then if no alternate motion comes forth, then it is a denial? Is that where we are? Does that make sense?
I guess that does make sense.
We've just never done that.
All options
No,
would
we
be
haven't done it
exhausted.
because
Yeah.
we haven't
No.
had this discussion before.
Does that make sense to you?
Sometimes an alternate motion may come up because someone sees where the problem is.
I actually think the first motion should always be a motion to grant.
But you
But we can't do that.
We can't do
No.
that.
Can if it's a tie vote.
What?
What?
You can't.
We don't always start with a motion to grant.
I mean,
Why not? Just don't make a motion. If you don't want the motion, nobody makes a motion.
Then it can
No, we have,
include-
No, you
our
have-
chances are, our choices are to grant or deny. We can't always start with grant.
Well, I know what you're saying. Even if we make
make
a
the
motion
pro-
for, you still deny it. You
Fails
can still
0 to
deny it.
7, at least it's clear.
But we still have to make another motion after
I
that.
know, it's a lot of work to make
Yeah.
a motion to grant, and if you don't believe in it, then why would you make a motion to grant and say all the reasons why it should happen if you don't even believe in it? I mean, yeah, I don't.
Well, I guess what we need to keep in mind when we make a
It
motion
makes sense because it-
is try to think of stipulations that would make it even cleaner when it goes through the first time. And remember that if there is a tie, that's what we would be looking for, perhaps. Unless we really truly don't want it, in which case,
We move
this
to
is all
deny.
fair.
Yeah. So I
I'm
think
not sure I
if a
can make
motion
sense
to
in-
grant or deny is appropriate wording.
No, just a motion.
And
We don't need
then,
it.
unless any subsequent motion, I think, can encompass both a further motion to grant, maybe with stipulations, and then a motion to deny.
And one other thought with that is we could maybe also make it clear that it's really the chair's power to determine when the board is deadlocked, in essence, if we can incorporate something in there. It basically says that the chair can entertain subsequent motions, but if the chair determines that they're deadlocked, then it's final.
Point where you need.
It's final, and we are going to consider it denied, moved on.
Right.
And give that power to
Maybe
the
with the
chair.
reminder to say, you are welcome to seek.
Yeah, I think, so either basically like that or what Trevor previously said is basically if you include that you try a motion to pass, try a motion to deny, and then have the option for an alternative motion, that is exhausting all the options. So as long as those three options are included, there wouldn't be any more to do. So I think that's
All right, well, I think I understand I think I have an idea of what the board might want. I'll try and draft something, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
we can
We'll look
criticize
at
it
the
again later.
notes and see if anybody understands.
Yeah, but
Rewatch
also,
the recording like 30 times, and then
Yeah.
maybe you'll figure it out.
but also, I think discussing this does make it a lot clearer to me. And that's one of the values of this work session, is that this actually is, I think, with maybe one little word change or whatever, a nicely written
Right.
rule. So, oh, stop it.
If we have two
Now let's
motions,
go to the
I'd
one
like-
above it.
I'd like to have a third part, we have to have a third motion, and it has to be a motion to adjourn.
Can I ask a question?
Because if we've had two tie motions, I know that motion's going to be an affirmative vote.
Yeah, Jody.
So as it reads, results in a tie vote. If it results in a tie vote, that's a denial, unless we have a subsequent motion. That subsequent motion subsequent motion, isn't that the one where we vote to deny?
Could be.
Or approve,
Potentially.
depending how we started.
But potentially it's a vote to.
In order for them to be affirmative votes, it has to be
Correct, but we could have started.
Unless somebody wanted.
positive, right.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So that,
We could have started with a vote to deny, and then we try to vote to approve.
Right, but I'm talking about if we vote and it becomes a tie,
Yeah, that's a
then
denial.
that's a denial. And then we have to vote that we're denying it.
And that becomes another denial. Regardless, the applicant's denied.
I mean, that,
Right, and so,
Because you weren't there, because you were the alternate, you were the first one.
Wait, was your question answered?
no, but that's okay, I'll wait to see what we get.
so, I mean, I just point out that the way this paragraph is written is it talks about what happens if the motion to grant results.
I know.
Yeah, so that's why we say grant or deny. Yeah.
So it works that way, the way grant. Now, if someone comes in with a motion to deny and it fails, this doesn't say that it's denied, or it doesn't say at present that it's denied.
Well, it still says
It's
that
a
you
motion.
need 4 yeses to be approved, though, or affirmative. So we'll see what we get. I'm not sure we can make any more progress on this right
Yeah,
now.
I think you're right.
The only other thing I would recommend here on this paragraph 6 and frankly also on paragraph 5 would be to include, or if the board wants something different, what occurs when there's a tie vote, either on a request for rehearing or motion to grant the decision of a code official when you're considering an appeal from a code official. That's come up where there's been a tie vote on something like that, and there's not really a rule on it. Now, we would theoretically default to Robert's rules, but, the board doesn't always follow Robert's rules, so, or hasn't always historically, so just clarifying that, just for the sake of people coming to the board, I think would be helpful.
Okay.
So I would just include that.
Since you raised number 5, can I ask a question? Why does it
Right.
Why does it say why does it say a tie vote on a rehearing of 3-3 results in affirmative and it being approved?
Well, if I may, I think the idea
Please.
there is,
To make it easy?
Yeah, yes, frankly, is to give people more of a chance. If there's any doubt in the board's mind, the tie should go to having the rehearing because the board can still deny it again at rehearing. Or could still make the same decision it made the first time around at the rehearing, so.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Beth. Go.
And that doesn't fall under the 4-vote requirement under state law.
Correct.
Okay. Darn, I wanted to get rid of that.
Okay,
Can I ask a question about number 8?
yes.
What do we mean by act upon immediately? Because we are allowed to, I think we're allowed, if we need more information, we're allowed to postpone till later. Is that considered acting on it? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the point of that is, again, you should be having discussions based upon a motion. So the thought there is just the next thing that should happen is a motion should be made, and then discussion can be had on the motion.
That's
Well-
8?
Shall be considered immediately following the close of the public hearing,
It doesn't say that we have to make a motion.
but should be acted upon.
So acted upon.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Right,
We
so-
don't need a motion to start our discussion.
No.
Okay, all right.
No.
Can I just, maybe this is a question for Trevor, but in the event that discussion leads to a postponement, the public hearing should then be reopened and the issue postponed, correct? Because closing the public hearing would then prohibit additional information from being accepted without renotice and reopening the public hearing at the next meeting, right?
Yes, you only can reopen the public hearing if you're postponing because you lack information. Not because of what you just said. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, it may be possible that the board chooses to postpone because they simply want more time to be able to formulate a motion that addresses all the criteria that are pertinent to it. That is an action upon the applicant's request. It does talk in the handbook of local officials that it is possible for the board to say, hey, this is a complicated matter, thinking up all the criteria off the top of my head is not possible. you could even have like a couple of the board members who volunteer to go off and create something for the next meeting where then you will reopen it. If you're not adding new information, you may not need to
It's hard to-
open the public
yeah.
hearing again. If, however, you're postponing because you're going to the applicant and you're saying, we want more information from the applicant, then I think that it behooves the board to reopen the public hearing so that we hear from the public what their reaction is to the new information that the applicant is providing.
It's hard to think of a time where you would postpone it, even for us to gather, or think where you wouldn't have new information, but I would think we would err on the side of
we did it
opening the
once.
public
Yeah.
hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It- once-
okay. Okay, yes.
So before we leave section 6, I did have 2 other comments that I had sent to Steph. So one is 6-2, and that is the voting for the chair and vice chair. There did seem some confusion on this, and it just says it shall happen annually. But my recommendation is that we may want to be more specific about what meeting it takes place in, and then what meeting the possible new chair and or vice chair would take effect.
It's been December traditionally, right?
Traditionally, but we don't spell it out
Oh, no,
here.
I agree with you. I agree
And-
with you.
and my point
then the
is-
next meeting would be.
I mean, I think December makes sense, and because our terms expire on December 1st, so the December meeting does reflect who would be in place for the following year, or at least what board members leading up to that point are in place for the following year. And then my argument would be that we should make it clear that it doesn't take effect until the January meeting, simply because now you could potentially have a new chair who now, okay, what do we do? Like, we reshuffle seats, and also there is the pre-meeting with the staff and everything. None of that would have happened. So to me, it makes sense for the voted-in chair to chair the January meeting, because then they would have the opportunity, A, to wrap their minds around that they're now chairperson, and B, to meet with staff and everything else, to be well prepared.
I
and well
agree
versed
with
for the
you,
meeting.
but Trevor?
The only risk in doing it that way is if the previous chair had termed off the board.
Yeah.
And then you'd have no one to chair that December meeting.
So presumably you would have the vice chair would still be there. If you lost both the chair and the vice chair, one of my other comments was we have done, there's nothing in our rules and regulations, but we kind of have had somebody who had to step up for either one application because of a recusal, or I guess an absolute worst case, if you're both the chair and your vice chair weren't available, who could run the meeting for that evening.
Anybody.
We don't talk about, we don't have anything in our rules and regulations that talk about how we do
No.
that. We just kind of do it off the
Speaker
cuff
of
of.
the
Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
Alexander.
Presumably, you are right, but in my mind, I mean, it would probably be a pretty rare set of circumstances that both the chair and vice chair would suddenly no longer be members. I mean, it's
I do think a
possible,
date certain, though, is a good idea, and saying it's the subsequent month's meeting is a good idea, and I guess we'll take the risk. Jeff?
Yeah, this just reminded me I'm not exactly sure what the procedure is for when terms expire. Does the board member get notified that it's like happening?
Usually you read it in the Herald that you're not on.
Because then you have to reapply, right?
You will get a letter from the
City
city
clerk.
clerk saying that your term is expiring. If you wish to serve an additional term, you need to, reapply.
And even though
Okay.
December 1st is often the deadline, the city council now doesn't often get it done in time. The
usually
appointments
do it
don't
the
often
middle.
happen to that.
It's usually the
because-
middle of December.
Right,
Yeah.
because they do it in 2 meetings now, and I think it used to be in 1. I don't know. Is that it? Yes, Tom?
Is there a policy on remote participation by board members?
It's funny, this did say in person, didn't it? The voting.
I think so.
I thought it did.
Present.
Present,
Present.
right.
Well, it says in attendance,
So are you in
so
attendance?
you can be
Okay,
remote.
you can be remotely in
Yeah,
attendance.
you're attendance.
Tom, with us?
I haven't seen him log on. Trevor, if you wouldn't mind double checking that.
He is not in
Ah.
attendance.
But I did want to mention we should clarify when it's appropriate for remote participation or not appropriate in terms of board members and applicants.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, because for a little while, we were talking about applicants requiring them to have somebody be present here, either the applicant or an applicant representative.
Yeah.
Which I think is a good idea, considering that we had technical difficulties with one applicant that
Right.
resulted in.
I do think it's a good idea.
But have we finished two? I just,
I don't know if we have.
I think I would,
Oh,
I think that attendance is probably a broader thing, like to, to define in the rules, but I think I would probably be in favor of just keeping two the way it is, just to give us some flexibility. I mean, we always have a custom of doing it in December and then the new person starting in January, so.
I would like to put the months in.
I mean, it seems to cause confusion, so I would be in favor of trying to just tighten that up.
And then adding effective the following meeting.
Right.
Yeah. Subsequent is the word we like to use, apparently. No, I don't care. All right.
And
Yes,
sorry,
did you have another
before we
question?
leave section 6, just a minor one, but 6-13 is the last paragraph. I thought we had gotten rid of it all that uses the term chairman, vice chair. So if we go through, clean that one up.
Oh, gender neutral?
Gender neutral.
Okay, I have no idea what this sentence means. I'm glad you took us to that paragraph. Now that I reread it, I might understand it, so forgive me. If an alternate has already been appointed to sit in for a regular member, then the second alternate shall be appointed by the chair to sit on the board as needed. What does that mean, and what would change if it weren't there?
If somebody leaves the meeting during the middle, maybe that could be
But we don't ever tell the person that's not voting on that particular item that they can leave. I mean,
If they need to recuse?
Recusal.
I don't know. Okay, if you think it's necessary, I'm just not sure what it's adding. Okay, apparently everyone else is happy with
Well,
it. Go
I
ahead.
don't think it harms. I would agree with you. I don't think it adds a lot. I don't think it's harmful either. I think it makes sense.
Because
I don't know what it says.
well, I think
Unlike
that's
just-
like, say, we're in the middle of an application, one alternate is hearing the application, the other alternate's sitting there, happy as a clam. But one of the regular board members, or perhaps the other alternate, takes sick, and that person has to
Oh,
leave.
of course, but
Yeah.
that's kind of a given. Yeah, all right.
So we just chain them to their
Right,
chairs.
okay. Poor Jody has had to sit through so many.
Right, Jody?
Without change.
Yes.
I'd like to make the motion to. Was that deny or approve?
Okay, onward.
Sure. So the next, sorry. So the next section is obviously miscellaneous. Talks about kind of special circumstances, what documentation should be submitted to the board, postponements and withdrawals. Correspondence to the board.
I had,
Okay, I was going, often, when we know someone is going to ask to postpone, we take it out of order at the beginning of the meeting and decide on it. This allows for that? That's okay?
Well, taking anything out of order would require suspension of the rules.
Yes,
So-
yes, which I usually forget to do. Yes, we vote to suspend the rules,
And
and
then you
then we
vote to
vote
take
to
something
take it out of order. Okay, but that's okay. Yeah, it just simplifies it, I think, that everyone knows what's going on tonight.
Sure, you could, I mean, you could put in the rules that any request to postpone be taken up first, and then, I mean, if you're not doing the vote to suspend the rules anyway, it'd be better and you just do that as a matter of course, it would be certainly,
Generally, that's how it was done,
Helpful.
and then yeah.
it would be helpful to codify that in the rules.
Okay.
Great.
Is it a big problem that people tried to have two applications before the board at the same time? It's mentioned a lot.
Well, we just
Was it a
we
thing?
just had that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, I had a beef about that, but.
Yeah.
And you know, frankly, I'm with you. I have a beef with that too. To put it that way, I feel strongly.
No, I
think
agree
that there
with
should
you.
only be one, including appeals. But it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
included in our rules that appeals are contained in that, and
So-
we have the rules to go on. So if
Yep.
I think as you were suggesting that be included in a rewrite of the rules, I personally would think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, so I think my actual text, because I couldn't email, my text to Steph was that we should put on, this is in section 7(4), and it's the applicant shall be allowed to have only one active application before the board at any time, including applications that are on appeal with the Housing Appeals Board and the Superior Court. Because those things can be remanded to us, and therefore, I think technically we have two applications before us.
Right.
So that would be my suggestion.
Or you could
Okay.
end up in a result where you have two sets of conflicting variances for the
Yep.
same property, and then
Yes,
where are you?
and that's going to be legally a problem.
That's a problem. Agreed. Agreed.
Okay, good.
We'll have a plethora of those tie votes again.
So I feel like since I got a win, I'll give up my other one.
Steph?
Just wanted to mention, this might be a good section to add the detail on Fisher versus Dover, that it's applicable for not only variances, but any decision made by the Board of Adjustment, right?
So it is applicable to special exceptions, too.
Yes.
Fisher v. Dover is applicable to any land use application, including at the planning board.
Yes, David.
Which is a good segue for, I guess, my concern in Section 7, Paragraph 7. We kind of talks to Fisher v. Dover, although it doesn't actually cite the case. I'm not sure if it's actually worse for us to kind of talk Fisher v. Dover without actually saying Fisher v. Dover. But I also find as a board, we seem to struggle with how we resolve Fisher v. Dover issues. I know staff brings it up, and we kind of talk about it ahead of time. Sometimes the applicant speaks to the Fisher v. Dover, sometimes they don't speak to the Fisher v. Dover. And then what is the public's role in it as well? Because we have had a couple instances where an applicant says, I don't think Fisher v. Dover applies, and then an attorney for a butter or other concerned party puts in, I do think Fisher v. Dover applies. And so we get potentially lots of information about this, or very little information about this. And we always seem to be doing something different to address Fisher v. Dover requirements. And then the other question is does it require a motion or not? We've kind of been saying, well, as long as there isn't a motion to invoke Fisher v. Dover, then as long as we've discussed it, we'll move past it. But how do we?
Right, we have been all over.
It just seems like we have a lot of confusion over all of that.
And I don't know if it's fair if we bring it up first and decide that it is Fisher v. Dover, then the applicant doesn't get their chance to present their case, to defend themselves.
Right.
So I guess we
Because
should
it's not a
come up
public
with a...
hearing, right? We don't have a public hearing for Fisher v. Dover.
But the applicant is the only one that can clear their name.
You
They're-
do
yeah.
have the ability to invite the
The
applicant
applicant,
forward
right,
to
not
speak
the-
specifically on Fisher versus
Right.
Dover, and I believe that was something that Attorney Buckley reviewed at the
Because
last
it says the
session.
burden of proof lies with the applicant, and I assume that means they can do it here in person or send us information. I mean, I assume they can do it in person.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, I
Oh, it
think
does say no presentation time or public comment
Yeah.
session, though.
So it's sort of
Yeah.
like
I
we
guess we
discuss
have
it
had
amongst
it all
ourselves.
sorts of
Yeah.
ways.
We've done all kinds of different things. Yeah.
Okay, so
I mean,
let's...
it could be you could codify how you want to handle Fisher v. Dover. I mean, you could put something in there that if any board member, raises Fisher v. Dover as an issue, then the board can vote to allow the applicant to come up and speak, or you could allow that as default if the board is going to consider Fisher v. Dover. Give them the chance to make their argument, given that, again, it is their burden of proof. I will say, I mean, this is a somewhat objective thing that the board can work through. I mean, either it's substantially different or it's not, right? And you can have the two applications in front of you, and you know what you considered in the past, and and in often cases you do, right? Or maybe not, in which case you could vote to request more information, right?
But from a legal standpoint, do you think it's really it's really up to the board? We can solicit input if we want, but we don't have to? Is that true or not true?
Yes, yeah, I think on this issue, certainly. This is the board's determination, and it either meets Fisher v. Dover or it does not, right?
So it's
It may be hard for you to make that determination because you may not have that first application. Maybe something you just considered, and it's fresh in your mind, and
Right,
you're going to know
right.
it. It may not. It may have been a
Right.
variance application submitted 5 years prior.
Yeah.
Therefore, you may want more information.
And that would be one thing I guess I would request out of staff is if there is a Fisher v. Dover question that you put into the staff memo, if you can ensure that we have the prior application as part of our package. That'd be
It's pretty much always in the staff memo. I don't think we've had one that has gone back so far that I, needed to do extra research, but it's always in the staff memo. Therefore, we have a heads up when we come to the meeting, which is why my inclination has been to make the decision and not among ourselves prior to the, yeah, go ahead.
And if I could just amend one thing that I said, I don't think it's required that you hear from the applicant. I think just as a matter of fundamental fairness, you really should, just on treating people fairly the way that you'd want to be treated, right? I mean, if someone's going to deny your application, you'd want a chance to be heard first and make an argument, I would think. I would think that would be fair.
So before that applicant comes, should they be alerted that there's a Fisher v. Dover issue?
I mean, it may
Because
not
they
always
might
be
come with a
realistic.
whole cast of characters, and
Right.
really, we're just,
May not be realistic, but
okay, I guess we can talk
If you
about
give
it.
the applicant the opportunity, do you have to give the public an opportunity? I mean, we've had cases where neighbors have come in and
Yep.
said that there's a Fisher v. Dover issue here.
Yep.
yeah, I would, again, as a matter of
Then we need to
fairness.
change this paragraph a lot.
So we would have a mini public hearing on the Fisher v. Dover issue, which
But not
includes
on-
presentation by the applicant and any affected butters.
Now that makes that very complicated and potentially
It does.
time-consuming.
We also run the risk of them segueing into the current application
Right,
and us
which is
discussing
right.
that.
We
Yeah.
Which is
only
really
want to hear
concerning.
how it differs.
Yeah.
Right.
But I could just see us easily starting to talk about it
Right.
and opinions forming before we've had a full presentation on it.
Yeah, I think if we can, as simple as we can keep it, the better off we're going to be.
Maybe you could give us a couple of options to
Sure.
consider.
I can do
Because
that,
We're
yeah.
not going to reach it.
Because, if we do invoke Fisher v. Dover, that applicant is dead in the water,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
they have the right to rehear on that, I assume,
Oh, they have the right to come
Yeah.
back with something that truly is different.
but,
So they're only dead in the water for temporarily. They can come back again.
but if we're wrong,
But if we're wrong, did you say?
yeah, I don't know. This is a sticky wicket.
Well, they can appeal a decision of
Yeah.
Fisher
They
v.
can
Dover,
appeal,
right?
they can make a different application, they can,
I think you should get a stack of Trevor's business cards and just pass
give
them
them
out.
out. Right. I mean, maybe they'll see the error of their ways.
Ask one
Forget, I represent this board, Paul.
You can't represent it.
If we ever have one of these questions, we get to two tie votes, or we get a Fisher v. Dover, and Phyllis is like, excuse me, here you go. Trevor McCourt.
Did you, Jillian, were you going
Yeah, just one clarification from David's question from earlier. When you're asking for the previous application, do you want just the decision letter and the full application materials? How much of the previous application do you want?
I would personally think you'd need to see like the full application
You
so
need
you
a
can then
visual.
compare it to what. Now, in a couple of the instances, certainly like the most recent one that we had, not to talk specific cases, but they actually included the whole entire
Yeah.
prior application. In fact, they included
Right.
it first, which made it kind of confusing. It's like, but at any rate. But that doesn't always happen, and instead of my having to go back into the February 2018 meetings archive and pull it out and look at it, which I have done in the past, it would be nice if staff could,
Full application.
And could we
The
have the,
application and the meeting notes, the minutes.
the previous staff report would be helpful.
In that case, would a link to that
Sure.
online be appropriate? Or
Absolutely.
do you want everything in the packet?
What are you telling us?
I think a link is
I think-
fine.
So you don't want to edit that previous 160-page application?
I think a link would be okay, so long as
Think it's
that
fine.
meets the requirements for the public in terms of providing the public all the information that the board has for information.
I'm thinking in terms of the staff memo, under staff comments.
Yeah.
To see the previous application, click here. To see the previous, application minutes, here's the link, and they would be hyperlinks. I mean, if somebody printed them out,
Right,
you wouldn't be
right.
able to navigate,
And-
obviously, but.
We can't really go back
I'm fine.
that far because an application runs out of time. It will have lost its approval, right?
It should still exist.
I mean,
If
What-
it was denied.
right, if it was
Did not come
denied,
back to us. I
right,
think it was denied.
right. Yes.
So
No,
links
wait,
are
if we
okay.
approve something and it's not built in X
Assuming you have-
amount of time, don't they have to come back to us again?
2 years, yeah.
Yeah.
They have to pull a building
So
permit
we're
in
not
2
really
years.
going to be doing Fisher versus v. Dover in anything that's more than 2 years.
Oh, yes, you
So-
can, absolutely.
If the
Oh, because it
application
was
is
denied, I'm sorry.
Denied.
Okay,
We had one that went back,
just come in with something very different. I don't get it.
we had one that went back over a decade.
Yeah,
Really? I
Yeah.
don't remember that. Okay, anyway, I'm sorry.
it's tough to let it
Move
go
ahead.
of a good idea.
Good idea.
Okay, so the next section, if we can move off of our miscellaneous here to public hearing, procedure for public hearing. I don't know if there's anything in here that the board would want to reopen. It seems somewhat straightforward.
Apparently not to David. No, just kidding.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I did have one comment that I had provided, and it may not require a change to the rules and regulations, but we do seem to be a little helter-skelter at times on postponing. There is nothing in our rules and regulations. We talk about postponing things, but there's nothing for a procedure in the procedure section that talks about how we do it. And I guess my concern is, in my mind, postponing is actually a fairly significant, while administrative, it actually is fairly significant because it really affects the applicant in some way, and more often not, it affects the public in some way, in that people were expecting to have something heard on a given night, and it's now not taking place. And so I think it's appropriate for a motion to postpone to have commentary for the reasons why we think that it's important enough for the board to take the action to postpone, as opposed to letting the public, all the public who potentially might have been there, to give them, to recognize that there's an investment there, and that we should talk to it and say, yes, but the applicant's reason for postponing is more important than the reason for us to hear it tonight. Does that make sense?
Do you not think that we give them enough reason?
I think sometimes we've postponed some things. I'm not even sure we solicited a reason for the postponement.
Well, okay,
Not me. No, just kidding.
no. But we do the postponements, try to do them at the beginning of the meeting, so no one will wait, at least. But okay, we can be more thorough about that.
No, I think this is for after we've heard an application.
yeah.
And the public hearing is closed.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, yeah.
No, even if it's an administrative action.
Right.
We say we're postponing it. We take a vote on that. Prior to that vote, there should be, the maker of the motion should explain why they believe we should postpone it, or not postpone it, as the case may be, and provide that information. I don't think we've been consistent with doing that.
Okay.
I guess one of the other things that can be an issue is sometimes we do have a request for postpone, and we don't even have any of the information in our package. Should we choose not to postpone, we wouldn't know what to actually speak to. We've had some instances of that as well. Right. It's almost like a foregone conclusion that the board is going to postpone this item.
Right.
When it really is an action of the board to say, it is more important to wait to look at this thing than it is to do it on this particular night.
Okay. Yes.
But if we voted not to postpone and the applicant wasn't there, is that a denial? Like,
Not necessarily.
right, so
No, it's not.
what would happen then? It
Was the
would,
board being nice?
I guess they would just have to go back in.
Why would we do that?
no, if we
put
didn't
it-
postpone and we heard the application but no one was there, we would just make our decision based on the packet?
Oh, we would hear the application even if no one was there? Is that the situation
Well, if
you're
I'm
asking
saying,
about?
because often when we vote to postpone and the information's not even included in the packet, the applicant is also not here. So if we didn't vote to postpone, they wouldn't be here to say anything. So the only thing we could go off of is what's not in the packet, so there's no way for us to,
When we've had no shows, we've postponed because that just allows them to be put on the next month's agenda.
that's
Yeah, and
if we
that's-
do vote to postpone, but if we
Right.
don't vote to
Oh,
postpone.
I don't know, we haven't done that.
I
don't
know, that's
what
what I'm-
would- Yeah, I don't know what would happen.
So my argument is perhaps somewhat academic, in the sense that 90% of the time, 99% of the time maybe, we are probably going to vote in favor of the idea that postponing is more important than not. We have had a couple instances, though, where applicants keep coming back before us, and there are people sitting in the audience here who are waiting to hear that, and at the last minute, we kind of get this postponement. But I guess my other fundamental concern is if it's a fait accompli that we're going to postpone this thing, then why are we voting as a board? Now, what does the vote mean? So my point is if we don't even have the applicant's package in front of us to look at, we're making a vote to postpone, basically because if we said the opposite, we wouldn't have anything to be able to go and discuss. The vote becomes meaningless. Does that make sense?
Okay, I don't want to, but if we didn't have the applicant's package in front of us, they wouldn't be on the agenda.
But it is. It's an item on the agenda.
And somehow it just got lost on the way to here.
And we said, the applicant's not going to be ready to go, so we're going to postpone it. And we don't always have that information.
Okay, all right. Okay, I don't,
See what I'm saying?
I do, I just don't know why it would, because this is not worth going into.
We've had
See,
instances
yeah,
of that.
okay, I
I'm just
believe
looking
you.
for reasons why it's being postponed to announce
Right.
at the meeting.
Partly is to explain to the public why we are postponing it. I think that's important. But B, just if we are taking a vote on this, we should have like a realistic option that if we choose not to grant a postponement, then we have something with which we can go and take action on. And we don't always have that in the package because we said, well, the applicant has to postpone. So we just don't even include it. We've done that recently.
So then we would force the applicant to present the application.
Or we can consider the application without the applicant's presentation. Yes.
We do that?
So
Why
I
would
just
we
want
do
to. So
that?
I just
Why
want
would
to
we do
give
Why
a
would
little
we
bit
do
of
that?
color. Sometimes the applications are not included in packages because there is something we are waiting on. It is incomplete.
Right.
But for one reason or another, it's been noticed.
Right.
Yes,
And I
that-
don't want to bring up specifics necessarily, but in that case, there would be a lot of work going into something that we wouldn't even want you to consider because it's not complete. And so we're, forwarding the postponement, and we're not giving you the information because it's not worth your time to review.
But at the same point in time, the public has been noticed that this is going to be heard on this date, and they have a reasonable expectation that that's what's going to happen. And now suddenly we're just saying, as a matter of course, oh, it's not going to happen. And that's my concern.
I wouldn't say it's not going to happen. I would say it's not going to happen because you're not going to have the information that you need to hear from the applicant. But I do see your point, and I understand. I would also mention that in the agenda, we do, as soon as we get that
Right, you
request for
do.
postponement, we do add to the agenda, this item has been requested to postpone.
Yes.
And usually I get a phone call that says, why? Or, what's going on? And that is also, the role of staff is to answer the phone and give people information.
Can I just interject something on a completely unrelated matter? I looked at my phone to check the questions that I asked you stuff, and I did note that I did get a text from Tom Rossi at 6:13 asking for someone to send him a Zoom link for the BOA work session. I don't look at phones during meetings because we shouldn't be doing that, but he did.
But he could have called one of them.
I
But
did
it was on-
Tell him it was going to be on the agenda. That's the link that's on the agenda.
Oh,
I'll do that right now, I guess.
Let's just Skype event. Hey, Tom.
And it's funny because I only have his number because for the Citizens for Voter Education candidate night, I had him text me.
when is that?
October 16th.
Yes,
Yeah,
you
right.
were,
I
you
was
had a
gonna
hand
say,
up.
So the only other thing that I would offer, I mean, it's just it's a small point, but, say an applicant just openly doesn't show up, and you don't feel comfortable postponing it, you could deny without prejudice as well, which would just require them to, resubmit and renotice, even if it
Okay.
was their first time. That's always an option for the board, too.
Okay, all right. Just as long as I get another shot. I'd be very uncomfortable denying with prejudice.
If we deny without prejudice, is there a difference to the petitioner in that one will cost him to re-advertise and one won't?
Well, it depends on if it's
Whereas
done
if we
twice.
just postpone it,
Right, so
it will be an easier ride for him, her person, right?
That's right, but if they just don't show and they don't have any reasons, you don't know where they are,
I
it doesn't make
understand.
sense
We
to
don't
just
have to-
postpone,
right.
because you don't know if they'll show up to that one either.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, the last section here is just on electronic or multimedia presentations. I know that you have some comments about allowing people to appear remotely. I don't know if you want to flesh that out anymore, or if you'd rather just, we propose something and then you can react to it later. Maybe that's,
I think that might be better,
sure.
yeah.
Okay.
Rather than if this, then that, we'll just see it, yeah.
Okay, well, that takes us through the rules that we have. If anybody has anything that wouldn't have been covered through that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or talk about anything else that the chair would like to
Well, we
address.
do have a sheet of other members' questions, which I don't think, well, you can speak for yourselves if you feel like it's been covered. But Tom Rossi has some too, so I wouldn't want to, yes, Paul.
Trevor, going back to section 4,
God,
the
Tom.
applicant's responsibilities, I think you should add something to the effect of the applicant is responsible for his own application and its factual correctness. Any incorrect information on that application can be held against him or against the application.
Held against him in what way?
Subject for denial.
We approve applications as presented. There have been plenty of applications where the information in the application is not correct. Or the applicant presents us with information using city records and stating, this house was built in 2020 when the house was built in 1918. I just want to make sure that the applicants are on record that the information in their application is their responsibility. And if it's incorrect information, that can be used against them.
Yep, understood. I can definitely propose something in that light. Thank you.
I don't know if we have to say used against them.
Well,
Could
Will be
impact the-
considered.
By the
can be
It could,
considered.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Considered
Right.
in the
So-
approval.
something a little less
Yeah,
prickly,
perhaps.
Yeah.
okay,
Just perhaps.
can be used in their denial.
It is now, I'm sorry, do you want to say something? Yeah,
I thought we were soliciting, like,
we are.
ideas. Okay, so I only have one more. I don't know, and it's nothing about rules or regulations, but I don't know if it's possible for the ZBA to do administrative approvals. I'm not sure if legally we can do that, but I'm thinking like HVAC.
Yes,
things like that. I don't know if that is something that we could do, and that we could do an administrative
HDC
approval.
does.
Like a code official says it's okay, and then we could do it. I'm just not sure, unlike the HDC, if we can do that.
So not for a variance, but there are other creative ways that could be handled through zoning, certainly. So, I mean, if there are items that you think should be, areas where the zoning ordinance perhaps is too restrictive or too tight, or you're seeing, maybe the same variance application come over and over again, I mean, those are the kinds of things that we can take back and either work on here as a group here or bring to the planning board or some combination therein. I mean, that's definitely good feedback for for the planning board and for the city council, where they don't necessarily always get that kind of feedback that you receive all the time.
So like, it would have to be written into the ordinance that like HVAC units are exempt from the setback requirements of the ordinance, basically. Could you do something as broad as that, or?
Subject to the approval of the code official.
Because it is one of those things which I don't think we have ever denied.
Right.
Because we figured this is really such a benefit, we're not going to deny it, but we sometimes spend too much time on it
Unless
nevertheless.
there was a reasonable alternative, and I've seen plenty of reasonable alternatives been pointed out.
I'll move away from HVAC units because they do, I mean, sometimes they can be put in a location where the board thinks is inappropriate relative to the neighbors, especially some of them are noisy. But at any rate, I mean, we have had some other examples, though, where there's some pretty minor issues with that the applicant is dealing with that I understand the planning staff has to follow the absolute letter of the zoning ordinance, but it seems so painful to have an applicant homeowner come before us for some of these very, very tiny items, go through all the process, whatever money that they're spending on it, for something that is extremely, essentially, I mean, we conclude it as being essentially an insignificant issue, and we approve it based off of that. It is unfortunate. Attorney McCord is probably correct in that we can't do anything about it, but it is very frustrating to see these poor homeowners have to come before us with these extremely minor things because we can't somehow work our way past
I
it.
think the problem would be to define that very
It-
minor
it
thing,
always
because
is
it's always, there's always something.
Yep, it's subjective.
I do feel sorry for anybody that has to come before us.
Yeah, it's.
Okay, so it's only
Baseline sympathy.
7:30 now, and Tom, you had a long list for us, and I don't,
You didn't bring it, though.
but I have it. I have it. Well, do you want to end tonight and do the personal grievances another time? I mean that in the nicest way.
Personal beefs of the ZBA.
Especially since Tom is not joining us, and he is on here as well.
Yeah, well,
Would that work for all of you to come back another evening?
sure. We can talk about zoning.
No, we
Yeah.
can't talk about
Yeah.
zoning.
We're going to talk about the questions that people had sent us, which you should all have.
Yeah, but I'm done, so I don't care. I'm just kidding.
You don't have it.
I don't have.
Okay.
Ocean
Could you
Road.
Steph, could you send out the BOA requested review topics again, please?
Sure.
And maybe any others that have come since.
Yeah, you want the complete list sent to
Yeah,
everybody?
and so it might be a good time now to finish this and then go on to that another evening if, yes?
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, we'll let Tom review his list.
And pare it down
So,
to half a page.
no. I found it fascinating, especially the part about the accessory building or structure. And about the zoning, which you can do, but you can't do, the one about the variance in a different use neighborhood. I could read it aloud, but I won't. Anyway, so with your approval,
Yeah, that's a page and a half.
we will adjourn the meeting.
That's here.
You gotta do it better. There you go.
There you go.